They say Clifton Park is nothing but weeds and memories now. But one June afternoon, a young boy stumbled upon a truth the whole town had forgotten for nearly 2 decades. In the tall, sun-bleached grass near the roots of an old mango tree by the abandoned playground, what he found sparked a brand new investigation. And by following what's left behind, well, uncover the reason why Khalen Thompson disappeared. Khalen Thompson wasn't the kind of person who turned heads when he walked into a room. He wasn't loud, didn't like crowds, and wasn't especially funny. But once you got to know him, you'd remember him for a long time for his calm presence, his respect for others, and a quiet attentiveness that showed in the smallest details. In the Franklin Street neighborhood where he lived with his daughter, Khalen was the kind of neighbor everyone trusted, the guy who'd fix your leaky pipe in the middle of the night, who left a box of pastries on the porch of the elderly woman next door every time it got cold, who would stop his car just to help a child cross the street. Raised in a working-class black family, a night shift security guard father and a nurse mother, Khalen grew up with one guiding principle: never be a burden to anyone, but if you can, carry a little of someone else's. That mindset led him to engineering a field where he felt he could create something lasting, something real that served a purpose. To Khalen, railroad tracks weren't just steel and concrete, they were connection, connecting communities, memories, and people. Every morning at 6:45, he'd leave the house and bike up a familiar hill to Penn North Station, carrying his coffee in an old thermos and a sandwich wrapped in newspaper. Even though he held a senior role as a supervising engineer, Khalen insisted on doing site inspections himself. He believed you couldn't truly understand the numbers unless you heard the hum of the tracks beneath a passing train or saw the fine cracks forming at the metal joints with your own eyes. His younger co-worker Miguel once said, "If anyone makes engineering feel like an art form, it's Khalen." He never cut corners. His reports were always handwritten, with hand-drawn diagrams and red ink annotations. When asked why he didn't just use software, Khalen smiled and said, "I want the reader to feel like I was actually there, not just staring at some cold spreadsheet." But Khalen wasn't just an engineer. He was a single father, and the love he had for his young daughter, Amaya, was visible to everyone in the neighborhood, no matter how busy he was. Every evening, he stopped by the old bookstore on Monroe Street to pick up a new comic book for her. She reads before bed. "I read to see how she's growing." He once told the shop owner that fatherly love didn't need to be flashy. It lived in the little things: the toy basket clipped onto his bike, or how at every school fair. He was the one who rebuilt the wooden model train kids couldn't get enough of. Quiet as he was, Khalen had earned the respect of his community. He wasn't on any local board, but when something went wrong, a broken streetlight, an illegal dumping site, people turned to him, and he always showed up. He didn't make empty promises. He took photos, sent emails to every department, and followed up with the person who'd reached out. His way wasn't loud activism. It was quiet persistence, like reinforcing a worn-out section of track instead of tearing the whole thing down. But not everyone appreciated his integrity. A few private contractors, the kind who'd cut corners and used cheap materials, had been reported by him before. They didn't hide their dislike. Some even called him a troublemaker. Khalen didn't respond. He just kept copies of everything, one for the company, one for himself. "I don't need to win. I just need to be right," he told a coworker once, about a year before he vanished. People started noticing little changes. He'd glance around more often while locking his bike. He'd linger longer at the metro station entrance before going in. Miss Lorraine, the widow who lived next door, remembered one night, "I saw Khalen just standing on his porch. He wasn't smoking, wasn't on the phone, just standing there, like he was waiting for someone, or worried someone was coming." 3 weeks before he disappeared, Khalen attended a parent-teacher meeting at Amaya's school. It was a rainy, gray afternoon. A few other parents said he seemed off, not anxious, distracted, like his mind was somewhere far away from that little classroom filled with plastic chairs and watercolor art. When the teacher asked parents to share hopes for the new school year, Khalen was the last to speak. He didn't mention grades, he said. "I just want my daughter to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel respected, not just at school, but wherever she goes." No one thought much of it at the time, not until he went missing. His bicycle was still locked on the porch. Inside the house, with a family photo on the wall, there was still the faint smell of morning coffee and the soft hum of jazz on the radio. Amaya said her father had told her that if he ever didn't make it home one day, she should call Uncle Miguel at work. He had never said that before. That was the first and last time, a week later. A neighbor found the back door to Khalen's house unlocked, but nothing was stolen, no signs of forced entry, just a technical report on the desk. Someone had flipped through it. The final page's handwritten notes about a rail segment with faulty structure were gone. Then, 3 years later, on a sweltering summer afternoon, a boy named Jalil found a small, dirt-covered ring beneath the dry fountain in Clifton Park, etched faintly on the inside the name Khalen. July 12, 2003 began like any other day. The sun was mild, the early summer air thick and humid. Neighbors saw Khalen wearing a blue button-up shirt, his backpack slung over one shoulder, and his railway worker badge pinned neatly to his left chest pocket. He left the house at 6:47 a.m., a few minutes earlier than usual. His old bicycle, with its silver frame and worn brown leather seat, rolled down the street toward Penn North Metro Station. That was the last time anyone saw him. Khalen never showed up for work that day. The engineering office checked the shift logs and confirmed he hadn't signed in either at the site or at the office. But what truly alarmed his family was the sight inside the house, his old Nokia phone still sitting on the kitchen counter, next to a sticky note that read, "Pick up Amaya at 5. His breakfast was half-eaten. The coffee in his thermos had gone cold. It was Miss Lorraine, the neighbor with a spare key for emergencies, who picked up Amaya that day. She didn't ask too many questions. Lorraine recalled, "Just said, Daddy must-be got stuck at work." But I knew something wasn't right. Khalen was always on time, always gave a heads up. The family called the police immediately, but the response was, "Procedural adults have the right to disappear. Call back in 72 hours for those who knew Khalen." That answer felt like a slap in the face. 2 days later, his bicycle was found behind the Penn North Station, oddly not where he usually left it. Even stranger, it wasn't locked. The seat was muddy, the back tire a little flat as if someone had ridden it and ditched it in a hurry. Police noted the incident but didn't open a criminal case. No evidence of a crime, they said, and so. A strange silence settled in. No texts, no bank activity, no clear footage. His family and friends began asking around at every shop near the station, posting flyers, printing them with their own money. Amaya, just 9 years old, scribbled her own plea, "If you see my dad, please tell me," a week after Khalen vanished. The local paper ran a short piece, 38-year-old engineer missing in Baltimore, no signs of foul play, but his family believed otherwise. They suspected someone had targeted him because of something he knew or something he did. His closest friend Miguel began digging through old project files. One name kept coming up. Richard Bella contractor Khalen had once flagged for using substandard concrete in a stretch of track near a residential area, just weeks before he went missing. Miguel remembered overhearing a tense phone call. "I've already submitted the report. What you do is on you, but if I see something wrong, I'll keep reporting it," Khalen had said. Then he hung up and stayed quiet the rest of the afternoon. Not long after that, someone was seen lurking near the alley behind Khalen's house. Neighbors noticed a black SUV parked nearby for 3 nights in a row. When approached, the person inside claimed they were looking for an HVAC repair shop, but they never got out, never knocked on any doors. On the 4th day, the SUV vanished. Around the same time, a note appeared in Khalen's mailbox. It read, "Best to stay quiet." No one knows if Khalen read that note, but the next morning, he got up early, dropped his daughter off with Miss Lorraine, and never came back. Another strange detail emerged. The metro station camera, which usually recorded daily commuter footage, had a data glitch that exact morning. The transit authority blamed it on a storage system malfunction, but when Miguel pressed for specifics, no one could give a clear explanation. It's like someone deleted just the footage from that hour, but wasn't dumb enough to wipe the whole thing, he later said in an informal interview from then on. The case began attracting attention from a few independent journalists, but not from the police department. They're not lying. They're just not saying anything. One investigative reporter later observed, "Meanwhile, Amaya, now in fourth grade, kept her father's backpack beside her bed every night. She touched the small photo inside and whispered, "I'm still here." 3 years after Khalen disappeared, Clifton Park haunts, lively in the memories of many Baltimore residents, had fallen silent. The fountain was dry, the playground rusted, and weeds overtook the grounds. On a sweltering summer afternoon in 2006, Jalil, a 12-year-old boy living with his grandmother nearby, sneaked into the park with his friends while running around the cracked concrete lot. He tripped into a patch of soft dirt near an abandoned flower bed. His hand hit something cold and hard, a small metal ring, caked in dried mud, when he got home. His grandmother cleaned it and saw the faint engraving inside Khalen. It was Khalen's wedding ring, a unique piece with a flat face and jagged edges, gifted by his late wife. His family identified it immediately. But the questions loomed. How did it end up in that forgotten corner of the park, and why did it take 3 years to surface following the discovery? Local students and volunteers began re-examining the park. Behind the northern row of stone benches, they found a slab of fresh cement that didn't match the surrounding structure right, where an old maintenance tunnel once led beneath the grounds. When students pried it open, they uncovered shards of glass, a burned electrical cable, and most notably, a damaged RFID badge chip. It was the exact type used by railway employees. Police finally reopened the case. Forensics confirmed that the chip's partial serial number matched Khalen's employee ID. It wasn't enough to prove it was his, but it was enough to restart the investigation. Then a new witness came forward, Jerome, a man who had once been homeless and lived near the park, recounted that on a summer night in 2003, he saw a black SUV pull up to the park's side gate around 2 a.m. 2 men got out, and a third was being led. He didn't fight back, just walked real slow, like he already knew what was coming, Jerome said, voice trailing off. Khalen's disappearance was no longer just a grown man gone missing. It had become a story of a voice silenced, a missing link removed, and a city that looked the other way for far too long. When the case was reopened, a team of young investigators was assigned to re-examine every piece of data, especially leads previously overlooked. They discovered that in the 3 months leading up to his disappearance, Khalen had sent more than 17 internal emails to the Quality Control Department, an unusually high number for someone as reserved as he was. Nearly all of them pertained to repairs along the West Baltimore rail linear line once bid on by Richard Bell's company before being disqualified. What stood out most? Not a single email received a reply. No one in management even acknowledged reading them. Miguel, Khalen's closest colleague, also noticed something troubling. A technical report they'd co-authored in June 2003 had been altered after submission. The section where Khalen clearly flagged a structural misalignment risk was completely erased, and his signature was replaced with a scanned copy, not his real handwriting. Miguel said in an unofficial statement, when he inquired with the archives department, the records manager claimed the original was missing. All that remained was a PDF in the internal system with no edit history available. Then came something even stranger. 4 months after Khalen's disappearance, his family received an unmarked envelope on their doorstep. Inside were 2 items, a broken wristwatch and a small string Khalen had once used to loop his bike keys. What chilled them wasn't just the items, but the timing. It was delivered on Amaya's birthday, as if someone knew, as if someone was still watching. Neighbors began recalling details they'd once brushed off: a strange man standing outside Khalen's home every morning during the week before he vanished, an unmarked car parked near the park late at night, and the sound of a train horn blaring at 2 a.m., the same hour Khalen would sometimes inspect tracks during emergency shifts. There was no solid evidence, but when pieced together, a picture began to emerge. Someone had been watching Khalen for a while, and they knew exactly when he was most vulnerable. A turning point came when the team tracked down a former railway employee named Ellis Monroe, who had worked in technical records management. At first, Ellis refused to talk, but once assured his identity would be protected, he agreed to speak off the record. Ellis admitted he'd once been told to quietly remove certain reports from the internal system, including ones with Khalen's name, not delete them. He said, just file them away somewhere no one looks, like locking them in the bottom drawer. When asked who gave the order, Ellis replied, "I'm not sure, but it wasn't someone in engineering. It came from higher up." That revelation shifted the investigation's focus. The team began questioning the relationships between certain contractors and project approvers. Why were some companies being fast-tracked, while engineers like Khalen, who repeatedly flagged safety risks, were being ignored? And did those work-related tensions have anything to do with his disappearance at the same time? A new lead surfaced, just before he vanished. Khalen had printed a nearly 300-page documented detailed compilation of structural violations and fraudulent bidding across 3 major rail lines. The last person to see him holding it was Miguel. On a Friday afternoon, 3 days before he disappeared, that document was never seen again. His family didn't have it. The engineering office didn't have it. No one could confirm ever seeing it afterward. It vanished just like him. Then another contradiction became glaring. Why didn't the internal reporting system flag anything about the sudden disappearance of a senior engineer at the time? HR simply stated, "He didn't show up," so we marked it as unauthorized leave. No follow-up calls, no warning letters, to those who loved Khalen. It wasn't just neglect. It felt deliberate, like someone wanted to forget. One woman, Natalia station cleaner, shared that on the morning Khalen went missing. She saw a man who looked like him speaking to someone in a suit near the station's side entrance spot with no security cameras. He wasn't carrying his usual backpack, but I remember his face, it looked tense. Like he was cornered, she said. The deeper the team dug, the more it felt like something was being concealed. Records from Khalen's cell provider, normally archived, had been mysteriously lost in a backup error from 2005. The last few messages were fragments, just scattered characters. Unreadable. Not only was this a technical hurdle, it gave the unsettling impression that someone had acted ahead of time, someone smart enough to wipe traces, but careful not to erase so much it drew suspicion. Khalen's family, especially his younger sister Patrice, took matters into their own hands, reaching out to the media and calling on the community for help. She shared scans of Khalen's handwritten notes, his messy scribbles on engineering concepts, improvement ideas, and even a few poems for his daughter. One excerpt went viral, "If one day am not home." Just follow the sound of the trains across the sky. Simple words, but they resonated with thousands. And the story of Khalen grew from a single missing person case to a symbol of all those forgotten by the system. Then came a discovery that reignited everything. A volunteer searcher found another small item just a few hundred feet from where Khalen's ring was found, under an old tree at the edge of Clifton Park. It was a broken piece of wood, about the length of a hand, one end slightly charred, with small carvings etched into its surface, 3 parallel lines, and a slanted A shape. No one knew what it meant except Amaya, now 12. She immediately recognized it. It was a symbol she and her father used to draw when playing their secret sign game as kids. That detail raised unsettling questions. Had Khalen been at Clifton Park? Under what circumstances did he go there willingly, or was he forced? And why would he leave a mark only his daughter would understand one Wednesday afternoon, while combing through construction records linked to Clifton Park? The investigation team kept encountering one name over and over, Desmond R. Cole. Desmond had been the engineer in charge of the park's drainage system just before 2003, the same time Khalen vanished. But what made Desmond's name stand out wasn't just his technical role. It was his prior connection to Richard Belthy, contractor Khalen once exposed. Desmond had worked under Bell for nearly a decade, but abruptly left the company just months before Khalen disappeared, around that time. He registered a small contracting firm and unexpectedly won the bid for the Clifton Park renovation. It was a modest project, but with a substantial budget when questioned. Desmond was polite and cooperative until the name Khalen came up. His demeanor shifted. "I didn't know him well. He was just a compliance engineer," he said, avoiding eye contact. Then came a crucial detail the very week Khalen disappeared. Desmond had hired a crew to pour fresh concrete behind the park's stone benches, the same spot where Khalen's damaged keycard chip was found years later. When asked why, Desmond cited natural ground settling, but prior technical records showed that section was perfectly stable. No repairs were scheduled, and no entry was made in the construction log. Digging deeper, The team uncovered that Desmond had once been slated to testify in a 2002 corruption investigation, the same one Khalen helped document, but just days before the hearing. Desmond abruptly withdrew. Citing health reasons, he left the company, launched his own firm, and vanished from public view. None of this proved a crime, but it painted a pattern. Desmond wasn't just a bystander. He was a linksome one who may have known exactly what Khalen was trying to expose. Desmond's testimony was carefully recorded, but what stood out to the investigators wasn't what he said, it was what he avoided. Asked where he was on the night of July 12, 2003, Desmond claimed he was home alone, watching a game and planning the park logistics, but no one could confirm that. No family, no neighbors, no phone records, just one food delivery receipt time-stamped 8:15 p.m., followed by a complete silence. Around the same time, the team received a letter from an anonymous source, no name, no return address. The message read, Desmond didn't act alone. Someone inside the system helped him. Enclosed was a photocopy of the 2003 park budget document. One entry site surface adjustment had been crossed out and marked by hand, internal approval KM. No one knew who KM was, but when the team checked personnel rosters from that year, only one name matched: Kevin Marlowe. Former Deputy Director of Engineering, retired in 2007, now living in Florida. Investigators flew out to see him. At 72, Kevin was soft-spoken, living quietly in a coastal neighborhood. At first, he denied any involvement, saying he didn't remember anyone named Khalen. But when shown the note marked KM, his eyes darkened. I didn't sign that. He said, "That's not my handwriting, but I think I know who might be written it." He refused to say more. Meanwhile, Desmond began to crack. He lawyered up, refused further questions, and insisted he was being set up. But former co-workers started calling in not to accuse him, but to share odd memories, like how Desmond frequently left the job site mid-shift without explanation. Once, he returned with mud on his shirt and dirt-caked shoes as if he'd just walked through an overgrown lot. The same lot behind Clifton Park, bit by bit. A new image of Desmond emerged, not just a sloppy engineer, but a possible middleman in a much larger scheme where Khalen's disappearance wasn't a random act, but the outcome of a decision. Public pressure grew, community voices rose, the investigation expanded. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, authorities returned to Clifton Park not for leisure, but to search for the truth. A small excavation was ordered at the same slab where Khalen's chip had been discovered. Beneath the cold concrete, they unearthed a corroded, dented piece of metal rectangular, like a tool case fragment. On its face, 3 faint letters remained "How." It wasn't definitive, but to Khalen's family, it was devastating. Patrice, his sister, wept when shown the photo. "My brother never left his tools behind. If it's there, someone else put it there, not him." Amaya, now a teenager, appeared on TV for the first time to speak about her father in a short interview. She said only one sentence: "If my dad had chosen to leave, he wouldn't have left me like this." Her words cut deep, a reminder that this disappearance couldn't be explained away as a man walking off the grid. It was the consequence of a series of actions or willful inaction by an entire system. Even Richard Bell, once seen as the prime antagonist, was forced to speak up. In a local news interview, he said, "I had no part in that man's disappearance, but if anyone on my team did something wrong, I'll cooperate." Yet, when asked specifically about Desmond, he dodged the question, only deepening suspicion. Now, both the public and the investigators were asking bigger questions if Desmond was involved. Was he just the hand? If someone had his back, who gave the order? And was the silence of figures like Kevin Marlowe simply passive or something worse? The case was inching toward another turning point, not just in the search for Khalen, but in a deeper reckoning about trust in the justice system, and how someone like Khalen, devoted, principled, could become a casualty of the very thing he worked so hard to uphold. At first, it seemed that with a suspect identified and new leads emerging, the truth about Khalen Thompson's disappearance would finally come into focus. But reality turned out to be far more complicated. The deeper the investigation went, the more tangled it became, each new piece of evidence leading not to answers, but to more questions. It was as if the entire case had been engineered to make people doubt the truth itself. Then came a major twist from Miguel, Khalen's closest friend and most trusted colleague, during an interview on an investigative podcast. Miguel made a surprising revelation. I once heard Khalen say if he ever disappeared, we should look for the place where you can hear trains but see no tracks. At first, it sounded like a metaphor, but it stopped the investigators cold, because on an old map of Baltimore, there was once an unlisted rail projection experimental track that was never completed, built behind what is now the abandoned land near Clifton Park. The area had since been forgotten, but if anyone would have known about it, it was someone deeply embedded in the system, someone like Khalen. Why did he mention this place? Did he know what was coming? At the same time, a new theory emerged. Maybe Khalen had uncovered something bigger than contract fraud, something that could have shaken the foundations of not just one company, but an entire system. But instead of being protected, he was pushed to the margins, isolated, left without allies. Many of those who once worked beside him, supervisors, colleagues, were now silent. I don't know, said one. I don't remember, said another. Even Miguel, once considered Khalen's last anchor, fell under suspicion. Why was he revealing crucial details only now? And why did Khalen's journal found on an old CD Amaya had kept include the handwritten line, if this ever reaches Miguel? I fear I'll have no one left on my side. That sentence shocked everyone. The man seen as Khalen's closest ally was suddenly cast in doubt. Miguel denied it. I don't know why he'd write that. We were always close, always worked on everything together. But others who'd known them both began to speak up about growing tension. Khalen had once proposed a safety redesign for a rail segment near a residential area, which Miguel opposed, citing schedule delays. They argued shortly after. Khalen began submitting reports independently, something unheard of from a man who valued collaboration. And then, another revelation. The official version of Khalen's missing persons report, previously believed to be complete, was missing its final page. The original custodian, Miguel. When investigators accessed a backup copy Khalen had once sent to a community attorney, that missing page was there, on it. Khalen had written, "There may be a colleague enabling the dismissal of safety concerns. I'm not sure it's intentional, but silence is part of the structure." The mood turned heavy. Was Khalen not just failed by the system, but abandoned by those closest to him? Some began floating a new theory. Perhaps the disappearance wasn't part of a vast conspiracy, but the result of psychological strain pressure, isolation, despair. But that theory didn't hold for long. Physical evidence, the wedding ring, the burned cable, the broken tools, strongly suggested someone had confronted him and possibly intervened in his final movements. Even Amaya, now a young teen, began to question things. In a recent interview, when asked, "Do you think your dad could be left without telling anyone?" she paused, then quietly said, "I don't know anymore. When I was little, I didn't think so. Now I just want the truth, whatever it is." By this point, Khalen's disappearance was no longer just a personal tragedy. It had become a reflection of a decaying system, where silence was more dangerous than the wrongdoing itself. What once seemed trustworthy, the missing page, the inconsistent testimony. Even Khalen's last confidant had all become uncertain. People began re-examining even the smallest things, early morning inspections Khalen once took alone, budget entries labeled internal adjustment, and the distant echo of train horns still sounding in the night at tracks no longer in use, together. These fragments painted a blurred map, no clear beginning, no obvious end. Even Clifton Park, a symbol of hope, now took on a darker meaning. No longer just the place where clues emerged. It had become a monument to neglect, a public space meant to serve the community, left abandoned, and then used to bury what no one wanted to speak of. Now, every tree root, every broken brick seemed to whisper something, but no one could fully understand. For those who had followed the case from the start. Confusion set in. They no longer knew who or what to believe. Part of them still hoped that somewhere, one final piece of evidence would surface, something that would untie the final knot. But for many, only one question remained suspended. Unanswered. If everything can be faked, then what is real? Nearly 2 decades have passed since that July morning. Khalen Thompson, railway engineer, devoted father, quiet neighbor, has never been seen again. There have been no official charges, no confessions, no remains, only scattered memories and clues, each one seeming to tell a story even it doesn't fully understand. In Baltimore, people grew used to seeing Khalen's photo on community boards taped next to school fair flyers or free clinic schedules. His face, with eyes both calm and resolute, became a symbol, but not of justice served or a case closed, a symbol of a question left unanswered. Amaya. Now a law student, once said during a campus speech, "If my father taught me anything, it's that silence can be a kind of crime. And sometimes the truth isn't meant to punish someone, it's meant to protect what's left." She no longer searches for him like she did as a child. But she still keeps his old wedding ring, tucked in a cracked wooden box alongside a burned wire and a worn metal chip 3 objects that say nothing, yet are everything her family has left to hold on to, in a rare effort. Clifton Park was eventually restored. New benches were added, a few rows of trees planted, but the old corner where the ring was found was left untouched. Beneath the tallest tree, a small wooden plaque was placed. It bears only one line, "Where the grass grows taller than justice. Remember the man who tried to repair the tracks."